Hello, everyone, and welcome to Safe's Project Interpreting Series. Here we are joined with Ben Harris. Hi, Ben. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
Hi, Tatiana. I'm great. How are you?
Doing quite well. Thank you once again. I'm super excited to have this conversation with you. Ben, it comes from a vast experience working within human rights, and he has also traveled extensively across the globe. Today, we're going to learn a little bit more about his work with us as an interpreter and so much more. So, thank you for joining us. And Ben, with that being said, please tell me about your journey and how it's connected to the Spanish language.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much, Tatiana, and thank you, Safe Passage Project, for having me here today. So a little bit about me. I was born and raised in the U.S. Southeast, so born in Virginia, raised mostly in Georgia. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in Spanish from the University of Georgia in 2012, and for the past 10 years, I've lived between Ecuador, Argentina, and New York, working mostly in communications for human rights organizations. So you very beautifully wrapped it up. Though Spanish is my second language, for the past 7 years, I've worked as a freelance translator and interpreter on numerous jobs and projects. And I'm dedicated to supporting equitable narratives, amplifying voices, and inspiring change. And serving as a volunteer translator and interpreter for Safe Passage Project ensures that my expertise can bring those who seek assistance one step closer to being seen and heard.
Yes, and I'm really happy that you named that because that's something that you're currently doing in your day job. And we briefly spoke about this before joining the call, but if you could share with everyone, like what does your day job look like today?
Yeah, definitely. So today I work as the communications manager for a an organization called Center for Community Land Trust Innovation. In particular, as a communications manager, I not only oversee the internal and external communications for the organization, but I also am managing the communications on a multilingual capacity. So I also speak Portuguese and a decent amount of French. So working between English, Spanish, Portuguese, and French is how my day normally balances.
I absolutely love that. I feel like you're just so well rounded. I'm like, when did we didn't have that opportunity to talk about that before. I did not know that. This is news to me.
Is
I absolutely love it. I love it. I love it. We are really grateful for you as an interpreter with our young people. So again, you've worked in various spaces, but what led you to working or wanting to volunteer with Safe Passage Project?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that we'll contextualize it through my former work. So while I was working full time in New York, I was working at United Nations University Center for Policy Research, also working in communications, in particular, working for a knowledge platform working to address effective measures to end modern slavery. Now, that doesn't necessarily relate to the work that Safe Passage Project is doing. However, it does relate to my desire to want to help communities and sort of bridge different gaps between them. So I think my interest in working with Safe Passage Project, it finds its origin in wanting to and or recognizing my skill set and wanting to give back to the community and connect the different populations accordingly. I'd lived in Latin America and the Caribbean, as you stated, for several years. Collectively now, I've lived between Latin America and the US by way of many other places for about 6 years. And so having had lived experience in Latin America, I think it's also important to be able to, as I said, sort of bridge that gap in communication.
Yeah, so and a lot of what I'm hearing is that being that you've been able to travel many places, the work that you've done has really impacted your experience and wanting to support young people or people that have been impacted by various different human rights things, right? So, with that being said, like just working with us or volunteering with us, rather, what are some of the most like impactful moments that you've had in your volunteering experience?
Well, I think the best experience that I can state is one that's really exciting. I'm very happy to report. The case that I was working with for the longest, the child, obviously not disclosing any names or information, but the child was able to not only um, go through the whole process, but was recently awarded their green card. And so it was a really, really exciting moment to having I was able to accompany this child, their parent, and the lawyer throughout the entire process from start to finish, basically. And I think it was about a 2 year process. And so for it to culminate in this success and know that uh, this child and their parent can be um, comfortably in the US at this point in time, I think it brings nothing but warmth and joy to me in my heart, I guess.
I love that. Like I mentioned earlier, I have had the experience of like speaking with many interpreters with my during my time here, and each time my heart is always filled with joy because you all do an amazing job and just seeing through the process and supporting our young people as they're navigating their own systems as well, or these systems in the immigration system. So thank you so much for your work. And because of that, I'm wondering, like, out of your experience, is there any advice that you can give to someone who may be interested in working with us or volunteering with us and may not know what route to go on, especially working with young people that are impacted by trauma?
Yeah, I think that it's a big question. And I think that I don't know if I hope that I can do it justice and give it the big answer that it deserves. I think the advice for giving someone or to give someone a project is to really consider their personal lived experience and how that can be best, and no pun intended here, but best translated into the work that they would be doing. I think that in particular, working with populations, working with children, working with children, working with populations that have been affected by uh, situations, who have been impacted by trauma and traumatic situations. I think it's important to take a step back and ensure that you're approaching things from a human first perspective. And I think that that's the biggest piece of advice that I would give going forward with those interested or who may have the potential of working with those who've had lived experience with trauma, whatever that may be. I think it's important to also just sort of as a trigger warning for those in general is that if the translator or interpreter has had lived experience, that they also be aware of that. Um, so that way they don't necessarily project that onto the person. And but in general, I think that it's being present. I think it's important to fully listen, especially as an interpreter. You're listening and gathering and have the privilege of listening to someone's story in its purest form. And it's up to you as the interpreter to ensure that that information passes through you without interference. So I think that that's really the biggest, it's not just advice. I think it's just kind of lesson and in being an interpreter and a translator is that you are the vector through which information passes, and it's therefore paramount that you understand the breadth and depth and the gravity of that, um, and understand that you are sort of capturing someone's voice, and that information is really important, especially when it comes to legal matters and projects with safe passage.
Yeah. You named some really valuable points of advice, especially for individuals that are very much interested in doing this work. And I think that as I continue to work alongside you all, I'm also reminding myself of that when I'm encountered by new people that join our team and that want to volunteer with us. And I think back to your experiences. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now, while you gave amazing advice, I just want to go back to when you had named that you supported a young person and seeing them through and they were able to get their green card, right? So, in that process, what were some tips that really helped you along the way while you were supporting this young person that is also experiencing trauma? If you can give some tips that really supported you in that journey.
Yeah. Uh, the first thing that comes to mind, or my first reaction, is to be aware of your limitations. I think that that's not necessarily addressing the trauma itself, but more thinking in the communication side of things. And I think that it's important when working with whether, it be a legal situation, a medical situation, any sort of interpreting scenario. I think it's important to, if you don't understand something, ask, or ask it to be repeated. If and that can be on either side. I think the tip there is to be aware of your limitations and ensure that you are. The next thing would be to be ensure that you are listening. You want to make sure that you're fully present and listening to whatever, whether it be again the lawyer or the child, or the parent and a mediator, whoever it may be. I think it's important that you listen. That's obviously the most basic tip in terms of interpreting. But when it comes to individuals who have experienced situations of trauma, I'm thinking what other tips would be important. I think that it's important to understand, wherever possible, to have some sort of psychological considerations as per the person who has experienced said trauma. So understanding, perhaps, in asking what happened, maybe, for example, the maybe you didn't understand, so you need to ask again. It's being mindful of how you're approaching that, to speak and treat uh, every conversation sensitively, respecting privacy. And because your job, again, is sort of the vector through which information passes, it's just important to understand that you need to kind of exist as that unbiased, unprejudiced uh, sort of telephone. I
I
hope that
love
makes.
that. No, it does. It makes sense. And I've heard you mention this earlier on, and I absolutely love that you mentioned that you were the vector in which information is being passed. And that for me, I love that. And I just wanted to highlight that and emphasize that again, because that exactly is it, right? As an interpreter, you are doing so much within this space, and you're navigating different lenses and different conversations, just ensuring that the young person, one, has agency, and also that they're being heard. And that is so important.
Mhm.
And now we spent a lot of time talking about how you're supporting the young person, right? And based off of what I've heard you say today, you have a vast amount of experience from traveling the globe and working in different spaces across the world, having what now 3 to 4 different languages that you speak. I absolutely love that. And then also, you're in this new role. And congratulations again to you on that. You're doing powerful work within the community. And we're really grateful that you're offering your extended time to us in this space. So,
Mhm.
with that being said, how are you taking care of yourself? How are you centering self practice within your own experience and journey, and navigating these difficult conversations?
Yeah, that's always the question. It's important to have, I mean, again, paramount, it's essential, it's important, it's all the words, uh to have a solid mental hygiene regimen. I think that that's not necessarily, I wish that I were better at it. I do every now and then. I practice journaling. I exercise regularly. I wish I said that I ate balanced and more sustainably, but that's not the case. Uh, but I think in these moments, especially as it relates to interpreting and and sort of being privy to the different stories. And I think it's important to uh, for me personally is to be able to sort of distance myself from the subject matter without completely abandoning the impact that it's meant to have, if that makes sense. Maybe that was a bit wordy, but I think that ultimately the mindfulness practices are it's related to being present. I think that years ago, I was in an interpreting course and I found it to be a really um, without being cliche, I suppose, a relatively profound experience because the act of truly receiving information in real time and then sort of spitting it out. This was a simultaneous interpreting course, not a consecutive, which is what Safe Passage mostly works through. Um, but what's simultaneous is that you truly feel like a robot and you feel somebody's words are just infiltrating your mind and you're outputting them immediately. And the only way to really be able to do that is be completely focused, completely present, and understand how that happens. And so I think working as a simultaneous interpreter, but then translating that experience into consecutive interpreting, it it's that's the biggest lesson. And the I think that in terms of self-care practices and mindfulness, it's making sure that I'm present with every word, decision, question, answer that I'm being posed with.
Yeah, I find that's very powerful, and I know that individuals take this on differently. And I know that you kind of alluded to like, I may not do these things all the time, but you're still being aware of how essential it is to the work that for your own. And I think the way that you phrased it was a mental hygiene, right? A clean mental hygiene.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love that too.
Yeah.
Right? So I think you're just giving us all the gems. Thank you, Ben. But with that being named, it is quite essential because oftentimes what we learn in this space is that you can take on vicarious trauma, right? Because you are now hearing these stories of the young person, and then that's something consistently because you worked on the case for roughly about 2 years, I believe you said, right? So our full term cases can take some time, and as you mentioned, consecutively we're hearing different stories. And if you're working on multiple cases, there has to be a way where you're able to still be present in that moment and then also separate yourself. And on top of that, you're working a full time job or any other things that are happening in life. So I completely understand that. And I'm really grateful for the tips, the advice, just the life lessons that you provided to us currently in this conversation. And then also to those who may be interested in supporting our work and volunteering with us. It's truly the work that you do that really pushes and propels the work that we're doing here at Safe Passage Project, and really getting the young person the support that they need. So I am immensely grateful. It was such a pleasure speaking with you today and having this conversation and learning so much more about you. I felt like I knew so much, but I'm like, today I got some more information, and I absolutely love it. I am so grateful. And with that, if there's anything else any last final words that you would like to share with other interpreters here, with your experience.
I don't know if I have any final words. I want to also elevate some of the things that you said, though. The words that I might have been lacking in my response, big tips related to agency and ensuring that it's part of the experience is that you are sort of the responsible one for ensuring that the person or the people through which you're working do experience that agency. So anyway, I think that I just want to highlight it was something
Thank
really important
you.
that you said. But other than that, I think I would highly encourage and I look forward to learning that Safe Passage Project's interpreting team will therefore expand and hopefully continue to help transform the lives of so many.
Yes, there we have it, folks. And with that being said, thank you so much, Ben. The work that you do is valued and is acknowledged and is appreciated. And I am really grateful for you and all of our interpreters here. So, again, thank you so much for having this conversation. And until next time, have a great day.
Thank you, Tatiana.
You're
Bye.
welcome. Bye, Ben.